We left off the other day with Shakespeare's two sonnets, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, and My Mistress's Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun on pages 780 and 781. Sonnet, remember I mentioned the other day, is a 14-line poem. Generally, usually they're about love, but not all the time. For example, in Gerard Manley Hopkins's God's Grandeur, that one is not about love per se, or at least it's definitely not about romantic love. Two different forms of sonnet. You've got the Italian or Petrarchan sonnet, this one over here, and you have what's called the Shakespearean or English sonnet. The Italian or Petrarchan sonnet, remember, is composed of an octave and a sestet. The octave, first 8 lines, the sestet, the final 6 lines. And there is between after line 8, after line 8, come on, brain work. There's what's called a volta, okay, which means turn in an Italian or Petrarchan sonnet. It's a change of direction, it's a change of emphasis, it's a change of ideas, it's introducing some kind of contradiction or juxtaposition to what was said in the first 8 lines compared to the last 6 lines. Shakespearean or English sonnet, okay, is composed of 3 quatrains, 4-line stanzas, and a final couplet. Look at the different rhyme scheme between, okay, the English and the Italian sonnets. The Italian sonnet, remember, this is line 8 here, so line 9 begins this. The Italian sonnet, first 4 lines have a rhyme scheme where the last line, the last word will have a sound of the first line. The second line and third line will then have their own rhyme, and then the fourth line rhymes back with line 1. So if you look for a moment, if you were to look for a moment at God's Grandeur on page 740, God, foil, oil, rod, A-B-B-A. Trod, toil, soil, shod, A-B-B-A. That's the first 8 lines. So that's what that is. And then the last 6 lines, C-D, 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 okay? English sonnet, like the Shakespearean ones we're going to look at the first one. Day, temperate, may, dit. Temperate and date rhymed in Shakespeare's day, okay? So they would say more like temperat and det, all right? So A-B-A-B, second quatrain, doesn't rhyme at all with the first one, C-D, C-D. Third doesn't rhyme at all with the second one, E-F, E-F. And then you have a final couplet that just rhymes, okay? So, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? Now, you've got a date of 1609, and that's because Shakespeare's sonnets get published in 1609. We have no idea if Shakespeare was behind that publication. His name is on the title page, but there's nothing that indicates Shakespeare is behind producing that book, okay? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a debt. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. Let's stop there for a moment. Sorry, throat's still really sore. So, first image, the speaker is comparing the person being described to a summer's day, okay? How so? Or it's asking, should I compare you? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. That is, you're lovelier and you are more temperate, more even-keeled than a summer's day. Now, obviously, Shakespeare's writing from the perspective of an Englishman in the very late, possibly, 16th century or early 17th century. We know Shakespeare was writing his sonnets as of at least the mid-1590s, all right? So, what is summer like in England as opposed to our summers? Anybody know? Relatively cool. We're quite a bit further south on the globe than London is. I've been to London many times for a month at a time over the summers. Usually temperatures are in the mid-70s. Often it'll be in the 60s and rainy. There have been a couple of times only when it's been very hot, okay? So when he says, you're more lovely and more temperate, when the speaker says that, that's compared to a English summer day, not a Murfreesboro, Tennessee summer day. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Now, May is traditionally, meteorologically, May is still spring. Summer doesn't start till June 22nd. But here it's meant to imply May also, meant to imply summer also. So rough winds shake the darling buds of May, that is, May storms shake and damage flower buds, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Summer's lease, the time of summer, the speaker says, is too short. And Brits everywhere will tell you, if only we could get 2 or 3 weeks of really nice weather so that they can go and tan and all that kind of stuff. Why? Man, once the end of August starts to come, or the beginning of September, temperatures do start to drop. It gets regularly 50s and 60s in September, and then cooler, 50s and 60s throughout October and such. So he's saying summer doesn't last very long. But another meteorological thing I think to bear in mind with this poem, Shakespeare was living and writing during the period that is called the Little Ice Age. It's not a literal ice age, right? But it was a substantial cooling for the northern hemisphere, lasting from, I think it was the early 16th century to the early to mid 18th century, okay? And it was a period where even days in May and June sometimes did not get out of the 40s in summers. Not every year, just periodically during about a 200-year period, all right? So, speaker goes on, second stanza. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, right? You think, Murfreesboro in August, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. Gold complexion dimmed is referring to what comes between the sun and us, clouds, okay? And it's often cloudy. And every fair from fair sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. Every fair from fair sometime declines. Fair means beauty. Every beautiful thing from, trying to think of the word, beautifulness declines. What was the thrust of Robert Herrick's To the Virgins to Make Much of Time? Carpe Diem poem. But he uses an image in the opening of that of what? Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, for old time is still a flying. okay? And what he's saying there is, the rosebuds that will be blooming today, tomorrow will be dying. The speaker is saying the same thing here. If you're beautiful today, you're going to be less beautiful tomorrow, less beautiful tomorrow. Why? By chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. Chance. Just everyday random occurrences will cause things that are beautiful to lose their beauty over time. Or nature's changing, or by nature's changing course. The simple fact of living, of days and times, in weeks and months and years. And notice the verb that gets used there. Nature's changing course does what to people? It untrims them. We do not use that verb today. We very seldom even use the verb to trim in the sense that Shakespeare's using it here. You could get a haircut and you could say, just a trim kind of a thing. That means what? Taking a little bit off. But in Shakespeare's day, the verb trim, one of the main uses of it, is one that we do still use today, kind of in two contexts, and both of those contexts are holidays. Thanksgiving dinner and all the trimmings. That's one usage. And the other one is to trim a Christmas tree. What do you do when you trim the Christmas tree? Doesn't mean you cut little bits off to make it nice and conical. That's the decorating. Thanksgiving dinner and all the trimmings are all the other dishes that are kind of arranged around the main part of the meal, traditionally being, the turkey. So the trimmings are all the other things that what? They kind of make the meal beautiful, okay? So this is nature's changing course doing what? It's removing all the accoutrements, all the other things that make, the meal delightful or that make one's beauty. How do you start becoming unbeautiful? We're all men here. Unhandsome. Assuming one is handsome. Where does it start? Maybe the complexion, skin gets a little rough, start to form wrinkles, gray hair, those things. But the but begins line 9. Notice, even though this is an English or Shakespearean sonnet, Satan, man, Shakespeare still uses a volta. He introduces that turn or that contradiction, okay? But thy eternal summer shall not fade. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? But what? Your summer will be eternal. It won't fade. It doesn't have too short a lease. It won't be damaged by the winds of May and such. Thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. That is, of the beauty that you own. The beauty that is in your face. Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade. Okay, now, if death isn't going to brag that thou wanderest in his shade, Psalm 23 about the valley of the shadow of death, what is the speaker saying about the beloved? And it's implied in line 9, You're going to live forever. You will be eternal. Okay? That's why death won't be able to brag that it has control of you. Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade. When? Well, the speaker tells us. When in eternal minds to time thou growest. And there's a bit of a pun possibly going on there. or at the very least, irony. In eternal lines to time thou growest. Okay? Two different lines are being referred to, or being suggested or implied in this line. What is one line? What develops in your face the older and older and older you get? Wrinkles, lines. So imagine, look at somebody who at 20 years old doesn't have any wrinkles. Look at that person then at 40 or 60 or 80, or let's take an old biblical idea of age, like Noah and all those guys. 100, 200, 400, 700. How many wrinkles is somebody going to have if they live to 700 years? They're going to be, like a human Shar-Pei. So go to eternity. So that's one image. What's the other eternal lines? We find out from the final couplet. So long as men can breathe, their eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. What's the this? This poem. These lines of verse. As long as men can breathe and have eyes to read, and they read this poem, you will live. You will live forever in these lines of verse. Okay? I don't remember if I mentioned it the other day. This poem, within Shakespeare's sonnet sequence, this poem is addressed to a young man. It's not addressed to a wife or a girlfriend or a lover. The young man is not the lover of the speaker of the poem. Let me rephrase that. The young man is a love of the speaker, excuse me, of the speaker of the poem. It's not an erotic love. It's not a romantic love. It's a friendship love, okay? In the first 20 poems of Shakespeare's sonnets, there are 154 sonnets in this sequence. The first 20 poems are all essentially directed to this male youth. He's usually referred to as the golden-haired youth, because he's got blonde hair. And the speaker is telling the young man, go have children. For one reason. Reproduce your beauty. If you don't have children and you die without heirs, you will be robbing the world of beauty. Okay? Now, so this sonnet is sonnet 18 in Shakespeare's sonnet sequence. Okay? My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun is sonnet 130. All right? Within the sonnet sequence, you have the speaker of the poems, who's a male speaker, okay? And then you have two either recipients of the poems or objects of the poems. The golden-haired youth is one, and the other is someone who is usually referred to as his dark lady. That is the speaker of the poems, dark mistress. Okay? Dark referring to skin color. And what happens in the sonnet sequence is there's a love triangle. We don't have time to go into this, but we will. Gold-haired youth, dark lady, and the speaker or persona. Okay? So, the first 125 poems or so are generally about the relationship between this person and this person. Okay? Then with sonnet 126, this person, the dark lady, gets introduced. All right? And what we find out happened is, and it's alluded to in some earlier poems, is the speaker introduced his male friend to his mistress, to the speaker's mistress. The male friend and the mistress hook up and develop a relationship. It's not just a one-night stand. So the speaker starts to get jealous of him because of her, and he gets jealous of her because she's pulled away his friendship from the speaker. Okay? So the speaker starts to write about him threatening poems. If you don't return to me as friend, I'm going to make your name live in infamy, blah, blah, blah. And he starts writing things about unfaithful friendship and unfaithful lovers, etc. Okay? My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun is not about this unfaithfulness and all this kind of stuff. It is an example of what's called a blazon, catalog of beauty. Okay? But what Shakespeare does with the blazon technique is he writes an anti-blazon. See, what the blazon would do, if this poem were written as a typical blazon, he would say, my mistress's eyes are deep as pools of aquamarine. You know, her lips are red as coral, her hair is golden as the sun, blah, 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 blah. Shakespeare does the exact opposite. Look. Sting, by the way, took this poem for the title of one of his albums and the title song of the album. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why, then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. Let's stop there. So, notice all the imagery. Her eyes, they're not like the sun. If they're nothing like the sun, then what are they? The sun's bright, it's white or yellow. If her eyes aren't anything like that, that implies they're the opposite. So her eye color is what? Black. Okay? Coral is far more red than her lips red. Well, how red is coral? In the ocean, coral is very red. Back up a second. In what ocean? Where in the ocean do you find coral grow? The North Atlantic, which is where the islands of Great Britain are? No, in the tropics. You got to go like to the Bahamas and further south. Okay? So what would Shakespeare's experience of coral have been? What happens when you cut a piece of coral off a reef and bring it out of the water? It dies, and it also fades. So when he says coral, he's probably implying pieces of coral he's seen which have faded from their redness to only being lightly pink. But he says that is far more red than her lips red. That should give you a kind of the willies. The color of her lips is not attractive. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. Dun is like dirty bath water, dirty dishwater colors. Okay? He's telling us a bit about her skin color. She's not white. Or, because of the antiblazon, he's, doing that. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. So, wire meaning what? Not like, this kind of wire. He means kinky wire. She has the hair of someone from Africa. Kind of kinky. I have seen roses damask red and white. Damask means varying in color. You have a streak of red, a streak of white, etc. No such roses see I in her cheeks. If she blushes, she just turns a darker shade of black, not red. Okay? And in some perfumes is there more delight. This is my absolute favorite couplet out of all of Shakespeare. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. Look at that verb. What reeks? Something foul, something rotted. So his beloved opens her mouth, and it's like smelling a bottom of a trash can. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. Notice, no volta in this poem. There's no turn from line 8 to line 9. There's no contradiction. He just keeps listing her beauties or her anti-beauties. Okay? So what kind of voice does she have? Probably very nasally. It's kind of like this. Kind of like Fran Drescher in Nanny. Okay? I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. In the sonnet tradition in Shakespeare's day, when speakers of the sonnet sequence would describe their beloveds, they were described as goddesses. They were Venuses or Aphrodites. All right? What's the problem with being in love with a goddess? Well, they're not here. Shakespeare speaker says, my mistress, when she walks, she treads on the ground. And that's implying two things. One, the speaker is saying, my mistress is real. She's physical. Okay? Treads on the ground. And it may also be suggesting she's a hooker. She's a streetwalker. Okay? That could also be why the mistress has a dark complexion, is out in the sun a lot. Okay? So, now we get a little turn. It's not a volta because it doesn't occur at the end of line 8. And yet, by heaven, that's an oath. By God I swear, I think my love as rare as any she or lady belied with false compare. I think my love there can refer to two different things. It can refer to my lover, my mistress. My mistress is as rare, as unique as any false lady. Okay, that's as any she belied with false compare. As any lady lied about with false comparison. The speaker is comparing his beloved with all these other, women that have been written about in sonnet sequences. Right? Now, when Shakespeare writes these poems, late 1590s, doesn't get published until 1609, it's kind of at the end of a vogue kind of period for sonnet sequences. Sonnet sequences became really big in the mid-50s. That is, the mid-1550s. These aren't published until 50 years after that. All right? So it's, this is like the difference between the kind of comedy that you would have seen in 1960s America on TV, or the kind of drama you would see in 1960s America TV, and now. Totally different, right? Well, Shakespeare's writing these at the end of that tradition, so by using the anti-blazon, he's kind of subverting the tradition. He's undercutting it. Kind of suggesting this is worn out. Time to do something new. Okay? Go from there to Ode to the West Wind. Okay? On 795. So we were talking about sonnets. Sonnets are generally love poems. This is an ode. Serious topic, formal tone, no described formal pattern. Okay? So this is an ode to a wind, or to the wind. A wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven, like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing. Yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes. O thou who chariotest to their dark wintry bed the winged seeds, where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion o'er the dreaming earth, and fill driving sweet buds like flocks to feed in air with living hues and odors plain and hill. Wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, oh, hear. So, poem begins, first section, there are 5. The first section begins with the speaker addressing the wind, right? And it tells us the wind is the harbinger of autumn or fall. And what does the wind do during the fall? We can open those blinds, look out the window, and look at all the trees around Peck Hall, or many of the trees, and what would we see? Very few leaves left. Because what does it do? It blows those leaves, and it blows the seeds from the trees, so they land in the ground, they get covered with the leaves, and they'll stay there. The leaves and the seeds will stay buried in the ground, or the seeds will stay buried in the ground, until spring comes. Thine azure sister, that is, the east wind. All right? Hear, oh, hear. Notice that last couplet. Wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, oh, hear. The wind is both destroyer and preserver. Destroyer, it's the harbinger of death because of winter, and the preserver because it buries those seeds. Stanza 2. Thou on whose stream, section 2. Thou on whose stream, mid the steep sky's commotion, loose clouds like earth's decaying leaves are shed, shook from the tangled boughs of heaven and ocean. Angels of rain and lightning there are spread on the blue surface of thine airy surge, like the bright hair uplifted from the head of some fierce maenad, even from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height, the locks of the approaching storm. Thou dirge of the dying year, to which this closing night will be the dome of a vast sepulchre, tomb, vaulted with all thy congregated might, of vapors from whose solid atmosphere black rain and fire and hail will burst. Oh, here. So the first image, the first section, is about the wind's effects on trees and plants, that is, terrestrial life. The second section is about the wind's effects in the sky, blowing the clouds and storms and lightning, wind and rain. Okay? But again, oh, here. This speaker is calling out to the wind, is invoking the wind. Thou who didst waken from his summer dreams the blue Mediterranean where he lay, lulled by the coil of his crystalline streams, beside a pumice isle in Baia's bay, and saw in sleep old palaces and towers quivering within the waves' intenser day, all overgrown with azure moss and flowers so sweet, the sense faints picturing them. Thou for whose path the Atlantic's level powers cleave themselves into chasms, while far below the sea booms and the oozy woods which wear the sapless foliage of the ocean, know thy voice, and suddenly grow gray with fear, and tremble and despoil themselves. Oh, hear. So, earth, air, water, the oceans, the effect of the wind on the ocean. Section 4. If I were a dead leaf thou mightest bear. Goes back to the first section. If I were a swift cloud to fly with thee. Goes back to the second section. A wave to pant beneath thy power. The third section. And share the impulse of thy strength, only less free than thou, O uncontrollable. So it begins, this section, with these kind of 3 questions. They're conditionals. If even I were as in my boyhood. None of those 3 sections, but referring to the speaker's youth. And could be the comrade by thy wanderings over heaven. As then, that is, like I was when I was a boy. When to outstrip thy skyey speed seems scarce a vision. What's the image? As a child, this speaker ran with the wind. Like the wind would blow leaves, and the speaker would run to try to chase those leaves. If I could do all that, if I could go back to my childhood, I would ne'er have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. The speaker is telling us, I've got problems, okay? The speaker is struggling in prayer with the wind, not to God. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. Why? I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. What's the speaker saying? Lift me. Why? Because I've fallen upon the thorns of life. What does the speaker want? To be removed from the pain of this world. It's kind of like Hamlet's, oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. So he's been addressing the west wind as a means of relief from pain and sorrow. He's asking for the west wind to intervene. The heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed one too like thee. What's the heavy weight of hours? Life. Time. Time has done what? Chained him down. It's holding him in its power. And the speaker says, but I'm like you. I am tameless, swift, proud. He wants to be released from time. Make me thy lyre. And you got a footnote. The Aeolian lyre, ancient Greece, produced music by the wind blowing through it. That's why people put wind chimes out on their porches. The wind blows, the piece of wood, the wood's connected to another piece of wood that is within a circle of chimes, and that wood bangs around and it produces, harmonic tones. Make me thy lyre, meaning blow through me, inspire me, even as the forest is. What if my leaves are falling like its own? What are the speaker's leaves? Hair, probably hair. The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone, sweet though in sadness. Notice, the wind blowing through a forest creates a deep autumnal tone. Autumnal means getting ready to die. And he says, your wind blowing through me will produce the same kind of tone. Sweet, though in sadness. Why in sadness? Getting ready to die. Be thou, spirit fierce, my spirit. Speaker's kind of saying, enliven me. Be thou me. No simile there. Be me. Impetuous one. And the impetuous one may refer to the Spirit, or it may refer to the me. Be impetuous. Okay? What does that mean? Rash. Acting without thought. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth. What are the speaker's dead thoughts? This poem. Like withered leaves, the leaves of a page. Okay? And by the incantation of this verse, notice that line. Its meter is incantatory. And by the incantation of this verse, scatter as from an unextinguished hearth ashes and sparks, my words among mankind. He's saying, my words are like dead words. They're not cold. They're like ashes and sparks. Well, what happens, how do forest fires that have been put out, supposedly, start new forest fires? The wind blows, it moves sparks and embers, new tinder burns. Be through my lips to unawaken earth the trumpet of a prophecy. To unawaken. Why? Because the earth is asleep during winter. It's dead. So, be through my lips the trumpet of a prophecy, O wind. If winter comes, right? Because it began with the autumnal. A wild west wind, the breath of autumn's being, the soul of autumn, in other words, which leads to death. So, here's the prophecy. A wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind. What's the speaker suggesting? Possibly, death isn't it. That is, death isn't all there is. Because what comes after winter? Rebirth. There will be a new birth after death. Okay? Go from there to another ode. Sorry, I did the wrong one first. Go to Ode on a Grecian Urn on 660. That's the one we were supposed to do first. 660. Put that there. What time? 8:46. This is by John Keats. Keats and Shelley were friends. Okay? The previous poem, Ode to the West Wind, was by Percy Bysshe Shelley, the writer whose wife, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, wrote Frankenstein. Okay? He died at the age of, 30? I want to say. Yes. Died very young. Keats also died very young. Keats was only 26. Okay? Keats died of consumption, tuberculosis. I don't remember what Shelley died of. So, Ode on a Grecian Urn. This is, something like that is divided into sections. And I tell my students every semester, every time I teach this, I would swear that I've actually seen this urn, the urn that is described here, in the British Museum. I've looked for it online. I haven't been able to find it. I'll have to go back sometime and look at all their urns and take a picture of it. So, 5 stanzas, just like Shelley's was. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape, of deities or mortals, or of both, in Tempe or the dales of Arcady. What men or gods are these? What maidens loathe? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? Everything he's describing is, the speaker is describing, is something that is on this urn. Right? The urn is dark, but it has alabaster inlaid around it. And the alabaster has a carving, a relief carving, that shows these things. Okay? So, the unravished bride of quietness, that's not the urn. That is an image of a woman on this urn. Okay? There is a Sylvan historian, your gloss tells you rustic, the urn is decorated with a forest scene. All right? So, stanza 2. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Now, that is referencing what's called the music of the spheres. It's an old, ancient idea. Goes back to ancient Greece. Remember we talked about Ptolemy and the Ptolemaic conception of the universe? The universe is composed of 9 spheres that surround the earth. Well, when those spheres move, they create music. Right? Pythagoras, the guy who came up with the Pythagorean theorem, was one of the people who wrote about the music of the spheres. And it was thought for a long time, well over 1,000 years, that if you could hear the music of the spheres, you would be enraptured. You would die from the glory of the beauty of that music. You would be lifted up immediately to heaven, or, according to Greek, belief, the Elysian fields, right? So that's the unheard melodies. Okay? Therefore ye soft pipes play on. What pipes? There is someone in the image on the urn. There's a guy playing panpipes. Panpipes look like this. Okay? Each one of these is a tube. One is longer than the next one, etc., so that they get different sounds. And you move your mouth over the reeds at the end and blow. So, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore ye soft pipes play on, not to the sensual ear. Why? Because nobody's ear hears the music that the piper on the urn is playing, but more endeared, that is, even more close to the heart, pipe to the spirit, ditties of no tone. That is, the speaker is suggesting that the pan piper on the urn is piping in music for the spirit. It's not a music one hears. Fair youth, beneath the trees thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. Yet do not grieve, she cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. We've just been told some other things that are in this image. There is a youth sitting under a tree playing the pipe. There is a lover trying to reach his beloved. She is forever staying out of reach. Why forever? Because these things are on this urn, and this urn at this point is a couple thousand years old. They're frozen in time. He will always be piping. He will always be chasing the woman. She will always be fleeing from him. And she will always forever be beautiful, and he, the person chasing her, will always love her. So notice what can never happen to these two. he will never fall out of love for her. Okay? 3, happy, happy boughs, the trees that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. And happy melodist, unwearied, forever piping songs forever new. More happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed. That is, the love of the lover for the girl. Why? This person will always be in love, and that love will always be new, and it will always still yet to be enjoyed. Forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion far above, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. The lovers, the description on this scene on the urn, as I said before, it's a snapshot in time and it's frozen. Everything there is perfect in a sense. It's not like all breathing human passion. Why? Because what do we do when we love? We have the highs and the lows, and we eventually die. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? So, new image. It's like different panel. To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer lowing at the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or seashore, or mountain built with peaceful citadel, is emptied of this folk, this pious morn? In little town thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell while thou art desolate can e'er return. So in this other image, we see a priest leading a cow covered with garlands, and off in the distance, there's like a part of the carving or the buildings of a town. But the town is empty because all the people are following the priest for this sacrifice. Stanza 5. O Attic shape refers to being from Athens. Fair attitude with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought. Okay, breed, design. With forest branches and the trodden weed, thou silent form, why? Because the urn doesn't actually speak, does tease us out of thought. That is, it makes us think, as doth eternity. Well, eternity does take us out of thought. Cold pastoral. Why pastoral? Because these are pastoral images. They're images of out in the country, not in the city. Remember, the town's been emptied, but it's cold. Why? It's a piece of marble or alabaster or ceramic. It's not warm. It's not living and breathing. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain. Keats is saying, when I'm dead and buried, you're still going to be here. I know, time's up, but let me finish this. In midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth, beauty, that is all you know on earth and all you need to know. This thing will outlast what? World War I, World War II, and it tells us what? Enigmatic phrase. Nobody knows exactly what Keats meant. Beauty is truth, truth is beauty, that's all you know on earth, and it's all you need to know. Okay, we'll stop there. Sorry for going a couple minutes late.